Hello, my friends. Welcome to the introduction into quantitative asset selection. This is going to be a very important lesson, and it's going to blow your mind if you've ever been the type of individual who looks at token projects or cryptocurrency projects or any project or any asset whatsoever and said to yourself, oh, well, this sounds cool, and maybe I should invest in that because of this story, or maybe I should invest in that because of this narrative. This lecture is going to give you a foundation, hopefully, so that you can move forwards from qualitative analysis and start to move into the quantitative realm, as we have discussed previously, because the theory is that it's the fastest one to learn, and it's the one that requires the least amount of cognitive biases and faulty decision-making capabilities. So, for every degree that this doesn't allow your ego to make yourself feel smart because you're telling different stories to people, this is going to increase the accuracy at which you're going to be able to select different tokens and different projects, and you may be surprised by the results. So let's get into it. So let me remind you of the incorrect approach before we get started. Don't come to me and say, hey Adam, what do you think of XEM? I think that the mainnet is about to launch and it's going to be awesome. Or Adam, what do you think about XRP? I hear the SEC case is going to get dropped soon. Or, hey Adam, what do you think about Uniswap? I hear that they are launching a new upgrade on their mainnet or on their decentralized exchange or whatever. Or maybe it's, hey Adam, what about Doge? Elon Musk is incorporating it as a payment system into Twitter or whatever. I have to remind you, all of this is qualitative bullshit. We don't have time to have these discussions. We don't have the time. We're biased individuals where there's too many opinions floating around. There doesn't need to be miles and miles and miles of text of people discussing the merits and the pros and the cons of different token projects because of things that they've heard. None of it matters. The only thing that matters is maths. Now, probably one of the key points that I want to go back to so that you can all remember this before we move forwards is correlation. For the most part, all of these tokens in the market, and I'm talking like 99% of them, may as well be called token number 21, token number 22, token number 23 for whatever. I don't give a shit about anything to do with them. They're the same trashy mathematical problem to us because the correlation in the market shows us that everything is essentially just a leveraged Bitcoin bet. They all move together, and therefore they're nowhere near as unique as you may mistakenly believe that they are. We're talking 95% of any asset's beta or its movements in the market is really down to Bitcoin's influence on it at the whole market level, rather than the maybe 1 to 5% or whatever is left over for the token's tailwind or actual market narrative. Most people get this around the wrong way, and that's what leads to their destruction because of their faulty expectations, their faulty understandings of what's actually driving the price. So just as long as we're approaching this market from a correct correlation adjusted perspective, we're going to be able to make better decisions. So with that being said, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so one of the basic assumptions of quantitative asset selection is what's called in the world of finance approaching the market from a perspective of rationality. We want to be rational individuals. What this means in practice is that we will always prefer to choose an asset where we maximize our rewards and minimize our risks. This makes sense. However, a lot of people are irrational in the market and they choose to gamble. This is where an individual completely disregards the risk and they only seek to maximize rewards. You can see in this respect that this is a faulty approach to the market. It's going to lead to people blowing up constantly. It's only through a healthy and rational appreciation of these two factors brought together that we can make the most rational decision possible. So, how do we define rewards and how do we define risk? So I actually struggled very deeply with this part of the presentation because there are so many different ways of defining either of these, and I understand the complexity may actually cause a lot of people to give up if I make it too complex for them in the beginning. So we will just define rewards very simply. We will call rewards the amount that something goes up, and we will define risk as the amount of variability in the price, so that you want to be looking at risk as the probability of the price not reaching where you expect it to go. Because we want the minimum amount of variability, right? If we're receiving money, we want it to come in consistently. We don't want it to be variable. This is a rational way of approaching the market for the finance experts amongst you. I know, I'm just trying to oversimplify this. I will get to the more complex stuff later, I promise you. So let's move on. Actually, before we move on, it's important for me to highlight this point. We're not going to be defining risk in terms of maximum drawdown. The reason being is because maximum drawdown is an instantaneous moment in the market, and it's a single point measurement, whereas returns and variability, these in a financial sense are actually measurements that operate through time. So we want to know how the asset behaves through time, not just at an individual one single location. So with that being clarified, we'll move on and we'll look at a couple of different examples so that you know precisely what I mean when I'm talking about the rationality of risk versus reward. In the first example, what we're going to give you is an asset. For example, just out of 10. We're just going to score it out of 10 for simplicity. Imagine that you have an asset that goes up 5 out of 10 with a strength of 5 out of 10, and you have an asset that has a 5 out of 10 risk as well. So on a ratio, this is going to be 5 over 5, which is 1-to-1 ratio. Before we go even further, I just want to remind you that this is not a trading measurement. This is not a risk to reward measurement like in trading. If that thought has entered your mind, I want you to immediately forget about that. This is completely different. It's not a risk versus reward measurement. This is a returns and volatility measurement in essence. The more experienced financial people will understand. We'll cover all of this. Please bear with me for the moment. We'll keep going through this and you'll understand what I mean when we move on. So in a second example, what we can imagine is an asset that has a 6 out of 10 amount of reward and maybe a 4 out of 10 amount of variability or risk. You can see this ratio of 6 over 4 will give you a ratio that's equivalent to 1.5. This is greater than 1. This means that you're receiving more rewards than you are taking on with risk. So far, so good. This is actually the direction that we want to go when we're looking at assets. So this is an early lesson in how to spot these. First, we started with an asset that had an equal reward to risk ratio. And then now we have